Good afternoon. It's 1 p.m. here in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, and this is The Ambassador. With me, your ambassador, Paul Mathenke. This is where we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics. Now, to our first story. Major disruptions continue to plague Eastern Congo as bank closures in rebel-controlled cities severely affected the local economy. Meanwhile, university students in Bukavu, which was taken by Rwanda-backed rebels last month, are slowly returning to classes despite ongoing fears. The unrest has forced over 500,000 people to flee their homes since the beginning of the year. Irene Njuguna has more.
In Eastern Congo, the closure of banks in rebel-held cities is causing widespread financial instability. Residents and businesses are struggling to access cash, making it nearly impossible to conduct basic transactions. The shutdown of financial institutions has led to a crippling of the local economy, leaving people unable to pay for goods, services, or even access emergency funds. Local businesses, reliant on cash flow, are facing closure, and families are struggling to meet their daily needs.
We get Congolese francs from other money changers. Others from Rwanda provide us with Congolese francs. But we lack dollars because banks are not operational.
The situation is particularly dire in cities like Bukavu, where the recent takeover by Rwanda-backed rebels has further exacerbated the region's economic crisis.
If the banks open, the economy will be reborn. Money will circulate from one to another. This one will buy, that one will sell.
Amidst this economic crisis, a glimmer of normalcy has emerged as university students in Bukavu are gradually returning to school.
During these months, we have endured many strange things. We stayed at home for at least 1 month and 3 weeks. We were confined due to the security situation. Even today, there is no serenity. We cannot move around safely.
For many, it is a sign of resilience in the face of adversity. However, fear lingers as the conflict continues to escalate and the city remains on edge. The ongoing violence has displaced over 500,000 people since January, with many fleeing to neighboring areas in search of safety. As the humanitarian crisis deepens, both the local population and international observers are calling for urgent action to restore stability. Reporting for GBS News, Irene Njuguna.
The African Union has firmly rejected Sudan's paramilitary-led parallel government, warning it poses a serious threat to the country's unity. Urging international non-recognition, the African Union emphasized the need for peaceful negotiations as the devastating conflict continues to displace millions. Paris Kigo reports.
The African Union Peace and Security Council has rejected Sudan's Rapid Support Forces declaration of parallel government, warning it threatens Sudan's unity. Following its March 11 meetings in Addis Ababa, the PS urged African Union members and the international community not to recognize or support any such entity. This comes after the Rapid Support Forces and 18 allied movements announced a peace and unity government in Nairobi during scrutiny. Kenya, initially defending its rule, later softened its stance. The African Union reaffirmed its commitment to Sudan's sovereignty and urged peace negotiations, as the ongoing conflict has killed thousands and displaced millions since April 2023. Sudan descended into a deadly conflict in mid-April 2023 when long-simmering tensions between its military and paramilitary rebels broke out in the capital, Khartoum, and spread to other regions. The war has killed more than 24,000 people and driven over 14 million people, about 30% of the population, from their homes, according to the United Nations. An estimated 3.2 million Sudanese have escaped to neighboring countries. Paris Kigo, GBS News.
South Africa's Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, presented the national budget proposing a gradual increase in VAT by 1% over 2 years, reaching 16% by 2026 to 2027. While the government forecast modest economic growth and plans for greater infrastructure spending, the VAT increasing has caused strong opposition from several political parties, particularly those in the coalition government, who argue it will burden the poor. Triza Chingo has more.
South Africa's Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana unveiled the national budget after weeks of delay. A key proposal in the budget is an increase in the value-added tax rate by 0.5% in both 2025-2026 and 2026-2027, raising it to 16%. This suggestion was met with strong opposition from several political parties, particularly those in the coalition government, who argued that such a hike will disproportionately affect the poor.
To raise the revenue needed, the government proposes to increase the VAT rate by 0.5 percentage point in 25-26 and by another 0.5 percentage point in the following year. This will bring the VAT rate to 16% by 26-27.
Despite the value-added tax increase controversy, Godongwana presented some positive economic forecasts, including a modest improvement in growth, a narrowing fiscal deficit, and increased infrastructure spending. However, Godongwana emphasized that the real challenge for South Africa is fostering a faster growth economic to achieve development goals, as the country's economy has stagnated for over a decade.
As much as the debate has been dominated by the proposed increase to value-added tax, the bigger debate must be about how we grow the economy for the benefit of all South Africans. A bigger, faster-growing economy and the larger fiscal resources that comes with it would give us more fiscal room to meet more of our developmental goals. But the truth is that our economy has stagnated for over a decade.
The budget proposal has sparked significant divisions with the coalition government, which was formed after the African National Congress lost its parliamentary majority. The Democratic Alliance, the second largest party, is pushing for a complete revision of government spending instead of raising taxes. With the final vote on budget scheduled for end of May, the outcome will test the stability of the coalition and whether a compromise can be reached. Triza Chingo, GBS News.
Former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte is now in the custody of the International Criminal Court following his arrest in Manila on murder charges related to his controversial, and I quote, war on drugs, end of quote. This marks a significant step in the ongoing quest for justice for the thousands of alleged victims of his anti-drug campaign. Irene Juguna has more.
Rodrigo Duterte, the 79-year-old ex-leader of the Philippines, was arrested on Wednesday by Philippine authorities and handed over to the International Criminal Court. The ICC confirmed that Duterte was taken into their custody on charges of murder as a crime against humanity, stemming from his brutal anti-drug campaign that has claimed thousands of lives. Duterte, who served as president from 2016 to 2022, has long been accused of orchestrating and empowering death squads to execute alleged drug dealers and users. These violent actions have sparked outrage and condemnation both within the Philippines and around the world. The arrest took place in Manila, and the former president was flown to Rotterdam, where he landed earlier today. From there, he was transferred to the detention unit on the Dutch coast. In the coming days, he will appear before an ICC judge in The Hague for his initial appearance. Duterte faces accusations of committing crimes against humanity, potentially becoming the first former Asian head of state to stand trial at the ICC. Outside the court, around 20 protesters gathered to show support for the families of victims, holding banners that call for justice in the wake of Duterte's violent crackdown.
We want him to be jailed. We want him to suffer, but he actually is lucky because he is experiencing the due process of law compared to the victims that they were just being shot and killed without any due process.
As the legal process unfolds, many are watching closely to see if Duterte will be held accountable for the deaths of thousands of Filipinos, with many hoping that his arrest could signal a path towards justice for those affected by his policies. Reporting for GBS News, Irene Juguna.
Ethiopia's Tigray region is on edge as a function of ruling party seizes control of the strategic town of Adrigat, deepening internal divisions within the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF. The interim administration, fearing renewed conflict, has urgently called for federal intervention to uphold the fragile peace agreement that ended the devastating two-year war. Paris Kigo has more.
Officials of Ethiopia's Tigray region have sought federal intervention following the seizure of the town of Adrigat by a faction of the Tigray People's Liberation Front. The TPLF, which governed Tigray's interim administration, established in 2023 after a two-year conflict, has split into two factions. One faction led by Gabriel Michael took control of Adrigat, prompting the interim administration leader Getachew Reda to request federal assistance to prevent further conflict and uphold the 2022 Pretoria peace agreement. In response to the escalating tensions, the Tigray interim administration accused Depression faction of orchestrating a coup d'etat and emphasized that power-sharing arrangements are non-negotiable. As of now, the federal government has not publicly responded to these developments. Paris Kigo, GBS News.
The ambassador will take a short break. We'll be right back with more as we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics.
What is always before you but can't be seen?
Kudiscover talent.
Kudiscover ulijuangaje like unaweza imba like yeah.
Kini Trace Jumi Kipchoge kwa ngoma na mfala wananidis na wanabonga kwa ngoma, mafanjo wananipenda ndo nazidi kwa roga, wenye walenjaribu manze walishachoka na nikozabe meditation naendelesha generation niliofanya kalki.
Wewe at 1 year old ulikuwa unafanya nini? You're feeling the vibe. Ulitoa a few days ago, unaweza taka utuambie like ulikuwa unafikiria nini when you came up with the lyrics? Yeah.
So I'm doing my thing. Don't try and stop me when I'm doing my thing. I'm tryna boss, let me do my thing. And if you're tryna win, you can be on my team. Yeah, so I'm doing my thing. Don't try and stop me when I'm doing my thing. I'm tryna boss, let me do my thing.
You feel like you're young at heart, I'm an old soul. If you could only listen to one singer or band for the rest of your life, who will you choose? Yeah, because we are here to entertain and educate at the same time. So the question of the day, have you ever benefited from any youth-led initiative?
What pushed me to get into the ground one was born HIV positive, by the way. So when I was born HIV positive, I felt like the society and the youth need to be educated much on about the HIV and HIV management.
Someone was confessing and alikuwa anasema like yeye ako HIV positive, ni student, but yeye badala ya ajue venye atasaidia wengine, yeye ana try venye atasambaza.
Unajua pia kitu kingine yenye natusumbua sisi ma youth ni kiburi. You don't want to learn, unaona?
Yeah.
Be there to learn. My youth are doing things that they are not supposed to do. Kwa sababu anataka kitu yenye iko beyond yeye. Iko beyond haezi afford. Unaona? Manze mimi nataka kubamba wase kuchafua meza, kukuwa na dem sijui mwenye anakaaje. Ndio at least wase wa feel like mimi nimeweza. Manze mimi hiyo ya kuweza, acha tuweze ki mindset. Na pia uset goals. Kama una goals manze kwa hii life sijui penye. Ni kama tu yani you should live with a purpose, not in purpose. Unajua most of us are living in purpose. Whereby yani wewe uko tu manze. Hata unataka kukatia dema na kwambia habari yako mzuri, unadoingi nini ati mimi niko tu. What is mimi niko?
Welcome back to the Ambassador. Now, tensions between the United States and its key trading partners have reached new heights as President Donald Trump announces plans to impose even more tariffs in response to retaliatory measures from the European Union and Canada. The latest trade moves, including a 25% tariff on steel and aluminium, have led to a series of responses from the EU and Canada, threatening to escalate the ongoing trade war. Teresa Tengo with more.
Abused really for a long time, and we will be abused no longer.
President Donald Trump has escalated tensions in the ongoing trade dispute by pledging to impose additional tariffs in retaliation against the European Union and Canada.
We'll be doing reciprocal tariffs, so whatever they charge us, we're charging them. Nobody can complain about that.
His recent decision to impose a 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium imports, alongside the threat of new tariffs on other goods like copper and cars, has drawn sharp responses. Both Canada and the EU have announced their own retaliatory measures, with Canada set to impose a 25% tariff on $20 billion worth of US products, while the EU will target up to $28 billion in American goods starting April 1st.
We will not stand idly by while our iconic steel and aluminum industries are being unfairly targeted. 25% reciprocal tariffs on an additional $29.8 billion of imports from the United States. These tariffs are in addition to Canada's 25% counter tariffs on $30 billion of imports from the United States in response to U.S. tariffs put in place on March 4th.
The imposition of these tariffs is expected to increase prices for consumers and disrupt global trade, particularly for industries reliant on imported goods. The tariffs have also affected steel and aluminium producers outside the United States, with the EU estimating a 5% impact on its total exports to the US, while Canada's steel and aluminium exports to the US account for nearly 90% of its production. Despite the growing backlash, Trump has shown no intention of backing down, reaffirming his stance on unfair trade practices. Teresa Tengo, GBS News.
The Kremlin announced today that it will reveal the details of a United States proposal for a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine, with the United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio stating that the United States is awaiting for Russia's response. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin made a surprise visit to the Kursk region, marking his first trip there since Ukrainian forces briefly occupied part of the area last year. Abi Hamid Ali reports.
In his visit to Kursk, Putin was joined by General Valery Gerasimov, who briefed him on the recent Russian military advances in Kursk, where Ukrainian forces had been driven out of the 86% of the territory they once controlled. Ukraine had hoped to leverage this region as part of any peace negotiations. The US on Tuesday resumed military support for Ukraine, as Moscow carefully considers Washington's ceasefire proposal. Marco Rubio stated that the U.S. is awaiting Russia's response.
The response is yes, then we know we've made real progress and there's a real chance of peace. If the response is no, it would be highly unfortunate and it would make their intentions clear.
Rubio emphasized the goal of halting all violence and starting talks, hoping to see an immediate end to hostilities. However, behind the scenes, Russia has reportedly put forward a list of demands that includes NATO's exclusion of Ukraine, recognition of its territorial claims in Ukraine, and a commitment to prevent foreign troops in the country. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had this to say: "We will not play with the narratives that we don't want to end the war, which are the narratives that Russia is spreading around the world. I am very serious, and it's important for me to end the war." While the prospects for a ceasefire remains uncertain, the situation highlights the complex geopolitics at play. Trump told reporters that American envoys are heading to Russia to discuss the ceasefire agreement.
We have a full ceasefire if it kicks in. We have to see. It's up to Russia now. But we've had a good relationship with both parties, actually. and we'll see. We'll be knowing people are going to Russia right now as we speak, and hopefully we can get a ceasefire from Russia.
With both sides entrenched in their positions and differing visions for the future of Ukraine, any potential agreement will need to address the core issues such as territorial sovereignty and security guarantees to bring the lasting peace in the region. The coming days will be critical as diplomatic efforts continue to unfold. This is Abdihamid Ali, GBS News.
2 United States astronauts, Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams, have been stranded on the International Space Station for 9 months and will have to wait a few more days to return to Earth after a SpaceX rocket launch was scrapped due to a hydraulic issue. NASA had planned to launch a replacement crew, but the mission has now been delayed, with the next launch opportunity set for Friday evening, allowing the astronauts to return by March 19. Vivian reports.
U.S. astronauts William and Williams have been stuck on the International Space Station for 9 months and will have to wait a few more days before returning to Earth. SpaceX had planned to launch a rocket carrying a replacement crew known as Crew 10, but the launch was scrapped on Wednesday due to a hydraulic issue with the rocket support equipment. The astronauts have been stranded because NASA determined it was too risky for them to return on the Boeing Starliner spacecraft they arrived on, which had suffered propulsion issues. NASA says Wilmore and Williams cannot leave the International Space Station until the new crew arrives to maintain enough U.S. astronauts on board for station operation. This mission, normally a routine crew rotation, has become a political issue. U.S. President Donald Trump and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk have criticized former President Joe Biden for the delay. Under pressure, NASA moved the mission up by 2 weeks and swapped to a different SpaceX capsule that is ready sooner. Its launch opportunity is now set for Friday evening, which would allow Wilmore and Williams to return to Earth by March 19. Vivian Scalabo, GBS News.
Pakistani security forces successfully stormed a hijacked train on Wednesday, ending a 10-day-long standoff with separatist militants in which 33 attackers were killed and hundreds of hostages were freed. The incident began on Tuesday when Balek separatist militants targeted the Jafar Express traveling from Quetta to Peshawar, killing 21 hostages and 4 security personnel during the conflict. Abdihamid Ali has more.
The Baloch Liberation Army, which claimed responsibility for the attack, had threatened to execute hostages unless the government released Baloch political prisoners and activists, with many of the militants wearing suicide vests and hiding amongst passengers. The situation was complex, but Pakistani forces eventually deployed special forces, air support, and hundreds of troops. In the final phase, special forces neutralized the bombers before going car to car to eliminate the remaining militants, with no civilian casualties reported in the last operation phase. This attack is part of a growing trend of militant activity in Balochistan, where separatist groups have increased their assault on Pakistan's military and infrastructure. Balochi militants argue that they are fighting for greater control over the region's mineral resources, which they claim have been denied by the central government. The ongoing insurgency in the region continues to challenge Pakistan's security forces, and this latest hijacking underscores the severity of the separatist movement. While the military operation successfully rescued a significant number of hostages, the underlying tensions in Balochistan remains unresolved. The attack highlights not only the strategic threat posed by the armed separatists, but also the ongoing conflict over the region's resources. The military's quick response prevented further casualties, but until the broader grievances of the Baloch people are addressed, such violent incidents may continue to escalate. The situation called for a balanced approach that includes both military and political solutions to ensure long-term peace in the region. This is Abdihamid Ali, GBS News.
And that's all for today with me, your Ambassador Paul Mathenge, on the Ambassador 1 p.m. Follow all of our stories at GBS TV Africa is updated through the day. We meet every Thursday and Friday as we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics. Thank you for your time and company.
Everywhere.